My name is Chloe Theodosiou. I'm a ceramic sculptor, primarily working in abstracted forms. And I have a really big interest in clay and glaze materials and trying to work out kind of what intricacies I can bring out in those materials and have that be a really big shining point in each of my pieces. I'm originally from New York, born in Sleepy Hollow, love Halloween, and grew up just outside New York City and went to college at Alfred University with a background, my degree is in fine arts. I have my bachelor's from there. And I also took classes on materials engineering. So I got a minor in specifically like material studies of clay and glass materials as well. I worked in production pottery as an assistant. I've been an assistant for a bunch of different artists in a bunch of different mediums, from metal to clay and like functional pottery, but also large installation clay pieces. And I worked in glaze manufacturing and tile production as well. So this show is called Planting Anemone. It's named after an indigenous plant called anemone. It's from my father's home country of Cyprus. So Cyprus is Aphrodite's island. She was born on a rock from the Mediterranean onto the island itself. And so the entire island is attached to that lore, even though like Christianity has taken over as like over the mythology of and the religious practice of the people. It's still kind of like a quiet sacredness of Aphrodite in reference to the island itself and like the people. And Aphrodite being a goddess, who she fell in love with Adonis, who was a human being. And of course, one day he died, and she elected that during the springtime, in her practice of mourning, she would plant anemone wherever she went. And I really like that idea of kind of like taking up the privilege or like the kind of the honor of marking the love that has nowhere else to go in a form of life. And so I think a lot about death and yeah, no, I think a lot about death because we've lost a lot of people in my life. And when I say we, I mean my partner and I, but also my extended family have lost some really big people in a really quick succession. And I think everybody has a point in their life where they kind of didn't realize how naive they were about what it means to die or to lose someone, and what it means to keep going. And of course, these all sound like cliches, but I think there's also this dialogue about it being a solo kind of journey in grief. And I am not good at being on my own. I am very, well, I love my own company when it suits me, but when it comes to stuff like grieving, it doesn't make sense for me to not talk about it. It doesn't make sense for me to feel things on my own because I am so like verbal and communicative. I'm such an auditory processor that it's like a verbal thinker that it helps to be in company. Not to say that there isn't stuff, of course, that I do on my own. And it's just so funny to say because I'm aware of how this practice is very private. The show is 3 years in the making, and it started with the death of an artist that I really admired, who I was briefly friends with, named Kari Marbro, who died quite suddenly. And it just startled me that something like that could happen in this way. I just saw her, and I got an email at work one day, and it just totally, like, the temperature in the world shifted, and I didn't know what to do, so I copied one of her sculptures that she in turn had copied from a famous artist named Daniel Rhodes. And it started with these kinetic rings that moved along an archway. And so that movement first of all, made a beautiful sound of the clay hitting the clay, the ring moving along. But also, it felt like what I wanted my feelings to do. This process from one end to the other, and then to get to go back, and then back and forth. Like I wanted to labor over what it means to be alive, what it means to have a practice, what it means to have work that suddenly stops. And I wanted to show her I was listening and I could continue. I like to say a lot something that one of my professors in college said, which is that your art is always smarter than you. And I start every single one of my sculptures with just an idea of what would be cool. Like, wouldn't it be cool to make this shape? How would I figure this out? It's very pragmatic. It's not very emotional. It's just I have an idea in my head. It's probably a form that I've worked with before, but I just want to see it in a slightly different context, which is why there's this repetition of these kind of like bumpy kind of shapes, but in different iterations. And then another kind of trope that then bleeds into another. I have these sharper like anemone pieces that show up in other pieces as elements, and then some as focal points. But yeah, I just start with curiosity of just, wouldn't it be neat if I made this shape? And then so much of my practice is after I finish building it in its greenware stage, so unfired, I like sit for so long just alone staring at it, trying to figure out what it's trying to tell me. And if I try too hard, I'll never get it. And most of the time, because I'm such a verbal thinker, most of the time it's not until I'm talking about the piece itself that I know what it's been trying to tell me all along. And so my art is always smarter than me, but my job as an artist is to feel things that people don't always feel like can be shared in a public space. So I'm not afraid to go dark, but when we're uncovering things, where I'm uncovering things with myself, it does get really intimately like personal, because it's not just, oh, you feel oppressed by an event that happened. It's not just, oh, you feel sad. It is the way that the event has wrapped around you. And a smothering feeling is much different than just a sad feeling. And I don't have any place to hide from my sculptures. They do know quite a bit. And this is all to say, not that I'm unique in this, right? I think that a lot of these do tend to be universal, but I very rarely feel like I can talk about kind of this grief that's just been building up and up on my shoulders. I think I've just lost so many really important people that it shouldn't have happened, and it's really hard to not get caught up in that. But realizing what that does to me and my body is a burden but a blessing, in so much as that I can do something with that until I can't, and then I hope somebody else tries to copy my sculptures, you know. My two kind of centerpieces as these the darker and lighter sides of grief. One, these kinetic rings moving along the archway in representation of like processing of these souls moving along a living plane, being recognizable but no longer able to interact on the same plane. And then one that has no rings, that is melting and frozen on top. The inability to process it and the heaviness of being stuck in one place. I use this metaphor, this reoccurring trope of this bumpy form that is stands in for like an individual, like either myself or just a person. And these two arches on top represent like the life of people that have so affected me as a solitary like planet. But also it is on me that they're moving. So it's just with me now instead of another person, and recognizing my autonomy in that, and you could just keep going from there. But then there's this reoccurring, like this bumpy form, some then resin being poured on top of or glaze being poured on top of, and stand in for an event that is kind of acted upon the body instead of these archways that are like moving along it, moving with it, in tandem with the individual. I'm very grateful for this show. It came at a really important time, and I've been so grateful to Dolores and the space. It couldn't align better with kind of what I look for in art spaces, and I really hope to continue to be a part of the community here. You know, I can talk and talk and talk about like, this one is about, I can get really dark with things. This is like my disillusionment of like what it meant to grow up, and this is my recognition with my own mortality and seeing things that I thought were just existed in like a linear way. How terrifying to realize that there are all these squiggly lines, but I'm also at a point where I'm pretty proud of myself to be able to recognize things in these pieces that don't need to be shared, but I still can. I think I spent a really long time getting mad at artists who had like journal entries, what I would call journal entries on the wall. And I think that, of course, it's all about taste, and I'm not going to try to take anyone's favorite art away from them. Of course, there's no point in that. But I think part of that anger in me was realizing what I was denying myself. And again, like, I'm not having totally universal experiences. I'm not speaking, I'm not, demanding people to like see all of my feelings in like a individualistic way. And I think that anger has kind of like left me because I realized how much more I could be sharing in a way of like, oh, you too, not just me. And it's a lesson that I think everybody learns and relearns. And this isn't coming from a place of authority. I'm not good at it yet. I'm still trying to get good at it. And this was a huge leap for me in ways I didn't expect. I learned a lot about myself, and that's pretty cool.